Well, Mike, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about collegiate life. You qualify as a collegian. You've spent a few years on a campus, and therefore I'd like to tap your experience a little bit. First of all, I'd like to know, just in general, I mean, how have you liked college life? Has it been a good experience? You've completed 2 years at the university. How's it been for you?
Well, I really enjoy school. It's really where I want to be at now. I like all of the pace of managing everything and putting it all together without actually being out in the workforce yet. I think it's a good step to independence.
Aha, that's a nice way to think of it, a step to independence. Yeah, I think that functions that way for many people. It's a period of time when one still is able to gather oneself and try to catch a vision of life and set some directions and so on before one sort of takes on the world. I think it definitely it's a time of sort of identity formation for many people, I think. And I think it has something to do with character also and personality development, although a lot of the studies suggest that we form our character much earlier and so on. However, I do think it's a time to readjust or to rethink certain outlooks and to check out one's values. Surely I've seen collegians whose values change during those years. So there is the opportunity for conversion and for also retrogression, I suppose, as some people move into poorer habits. I'm thinking about a particular problem, and that is the widespread cheating that goes on campus. It does relate for me to the personality and character question. There's a lot of national studies that suggest that cheating really is quite widespread on our campuses and is a major problem. We have people trying to figure out what to do with it, how to monitor exams in better ways, and so on. But I'm more interested in terms of the character question and the virtue question. So how about that, Mike, on the campus and your own experience with this question of cheating? Have you seen a lot of it? Does it go on? You think it's as widespread as the studies suggest, and so on?
Well, I don't know if I would necessarily say it's as widespread as a lot of people would tend to think. I haven't seen a lot of cheating just in classes and all, although I have known of people who were sitting beside me or whatever that were blatantly cheating on tests or who would gloat about having plagiarized something. And so I do realize it's a problem. It is a big problem. People don't
But you've actually seen that, people sitting near you and you knew they were cheating?
Right, and it happens basically in the large mass lecture classes where it's hard to monitor the test. I mean, you had alluded to that it's hard to tell who exactly is cheating or what exactly is happening, whereas in the smaller classes, one professor can keep his eye on all of the students, and it's really not a big problem. People aren't going to try to get away with things, whereas if you know that the professor's 50 feet away and is looking up at everyone, and people are more likely to try to take advantage of the situation then.
So that the temptation is sort of connected in with the possibility of doing this, and of doing it successfully. Well, you also mentioned the plagiarizing, which I guess we associate with having to write papers and so on. I remember having a very bright student one time in a seminary, and he wrote a paper for me that was so good. It was a paper on the theology of Karl Rahner, and he wrote these sermons in the style of Rahner. And these sermons were so good that I looked all around to see if he had really gotten them from Rahner himself. But as a matter of fact, he hadn't. He had written them himself. And but it struck me as one of the things I suppose that happens these days is that people do look for this opportunity to plagiarize. I think there's even companies, aren't there, that write papers for people, and they're supposedly background material, but when the students get a hold of them, they often can just change a few words and to hand them in. So that the writing of papers represents another chance to act in an unethical way, I suppose. You think much of that goes on, or?
I think probably that's more commonplace than the actual cheating on tests or exams, just because it's easier to do, and for the most part it's easier to get away with. It's hard to prove that somebody actually plagiarized something, unless of course they're obviously doing it, copying everything word for word. It's more subtle, so you can get away with, just borrowing ideas and not necessarily footnoting and not explaining that these are borrowed ideas. People feel that it's an easier way to get around doing a paper, and they can take advantage of it because it's, for a professor grading several papers, it's really impossible.
Yeah, well, sometimes, you go through them quickly and one might have a doubt about it and then not have time to pursue it. I've seen situations at the university where there's really been disputes about this. In other words, where I've interacted with the students involved, and that the student, claims that, well, it was like an oversight, that yes, they did use a lot of this material from a particular paper, and they footnoted one part of it but not another part of it, and the professor would interpret it in a very different way. So I think sometimes it's just not all that clear cut or black and white. At least I've seen cases like that where the students would say, well, I had no intention to cheat. It's more like I didn't understand the canons that govern this discipline, or I didn't understand the rules of footnoting and citations of the material I was using. So sometimes it does get a bit complex that way. I think the university then needs, or does have, procedures that would adjudicate those kinds of differing claims. But I think that when you look at this whole thing from the character question, there's sort of two types of cheating we might identify here. One is sort of the habitual cheating, where a person just thinks of this as a mode of operating. This is the way they're going to handle their collegiate career. They're going to, whenever they can, get other people to write their papers for them, or plagiarize the material, or try in often very clever ways to cheat in exams. I mean, there's a certain number of people, I think, who just make that a way of life. That's how they get through school. I think very often they don't have any confidence in themselves. They don't feel as though they really could get the job done or make the grade. On the other hand, there's a more episodic type of cheating, which I think occurs in situations where people didn't have a chance to prepare or for the exam, or it's just very easy to copy some answers or something like that. You see that distinction at all at work? There's two different types of cheating going on?
Oh, definitely. I think, in fact, most cheaters probably are the episodic cheater, whereas it's just something that you didn't have time to prepare, and so you'll get through just by cheating this one time, and then, it can happen again. But it's not I don't see a lot of people who I think generally say, I'm going to go through college life, although I have known, and I do know of several people who cheat on everything in every class, and so those would be the more habitual people.
Yeah,
but they don't even see it as being a problem or anything wrong.
Really? They just, that's their mode of operating.
Right. Whereas
really?
The episodic person generally has a great deal of stress and a great deal of anxiety felt with little individual incidents.
Probably afraid they're going to get caught, and maybe also a question of violation of their conscience. Is that right? One of your perceptions is that the habitual cheaters would simply, their conscience wouldn't bother them about it.
I strongly agree, because I think that the habitual cheater has put themselves in a position where it's just commonplace. And to start off, they've just said, well, I'm really just cheating against the big institution of the university, which, what does that matter? They've done so much to me, they make me stand in lines and all these other things. So they don't see it as doing anything wrong, and they can just block it out.
It's interesting, the thing you said there about they put it in an institutional framework. I guess whenever you depersonalize things like that, it's easier to get away with it in one's own mind. I guess we often call that rationalizing, but that's an interesting rationalization. Like the whole university's corrupt maybe, or things don't run right here, or they haven't treated me right, and I'm not hurting any other person. I'm just getting back at the institution. It would be an interesting rationale for cheating, that I suppose that could be one way of looking at it. I think it probably isn't true, however, that no one else would be hurt, is it?
No,
because you have the professors who are grading on a curve, and other people who are working hard, and whose grade might well suffer because some people cheat and hurt the curve in one way or another.
Well, that's true, and it affects everyone, not just the person who's cheating. It really has no effect on the university either way, but it just seems that that's one way to rationalize or justify an action that is known to be wrong, but doesn't really want to be felt as wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I want to challenge one of your statements about not hurting the university itself. In one way I think that's true, but there's another way in which the academic world suffers from this. Wherever general standards are lowered, for example, or when cheating becomes too prevalent, I think it does hurt. It hurts the general ethos of the university. It hurts the attempt to keep high standards. I think it creates a climate in a way that is harmful, maybe a climate of dishonesty or failure. After all, we think of universities as a place where we are pursuing truth. Now, actually, in day-to-day life of the university, it often doesn't feel like that, does it? There's busyness going on. You got to get to class and write papers and maintain a social life, and it's often very bureaucratic and large classes, as you suggested, and so on. But the university is engaged in the whole question of the pursuit of truth, and that is the highest ideal of the university, and it seems important to sort of maintain that. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that institutions are hurt by poor behavior. It's the same way if we look like at a church and we say, well, it doesn't matter that some of these people are hypocritical. The church as an institution doesn't get hurt when people are hypocritical in the church. You could adopt that position, but I would say that, as a matter of fact, the institution does get hurt, because the institution is more than just offices and libraries or sacristies and altars and church buildings. It's the people. And whenever the morale of the people is hurt, whenever the general character level goes down, the whole of the organization suffers, it seems to me. I think that's probably one of the reasons why you have national movements to try to do something about this, and articles written, and things appear in the Chronicle of Higher Education about cheating, and professors are saying, well, what do we do about it? Some are saying, well, you have to monitor more carefully the exams and don't give the opportunities. That professors have to be more careful in checking the papers to be alert to plagiarizing, and that some people would say, well, the churches should play a greater role in this by helping people to remember the virtue of honesty and how important it is to be faithful to conscience and so on. So I guess I feel as though higher education in the United States, to the degree that cheating exists, is hurt. And then if you look at any individual campus, I think it undercuts what sort of the ideals of what it's all about. Does that institutional analysis make any sense to you as I'm talking about it?
Oh yeah, it's a very good point, and it does belittle the university itself by the individual students cheating or doing whatever. But I think my point was more just that the rationale of the student is that it's not going to hurt.
Right.
But that does...
And that's a faulty rationale, yeah.
Right.
Well, as the whole practice is. And it's also faulty from another viewpoint, and that is whether it is hurting other people, and very often it does. I wonder what the reaction of students who are working hard and trying to be honest and don't cheat and so on is when you see blatant cheating, for example. How it makes you feel, or how other students feel when they encounter this plagiarizing and know that they're sitting there writing all these papers and looking up things in a library and trying to footnote properly and all that, and someone else buys a paper, changes a few words, and hands it in. I wonder how students feel about that.
I think it's sort of a feeling, I know personally, I have of disgust that someone would try to get away with things like that. But it's just the person belittles themselves in their classmates' eyes, and from then on, if you've seen someone who's cheating, you always tend to watch to see if they're going to do it again, and just to know that they are, you feel violated yourself because you've worked hard, or even if you haven't, you've decided to accept whatever consequences.
That's a good point. That's a very insightful point. There really are two ways to look at that, aren't there? That if you have worked hard, then you expect some sort of fruit for your efforts, I suppose, some sort of just reward. And then when you haven't been able to do that, which happens, I think, to most students, one time or another, you get caught short. Weren't feeling well, missed a class, not due to your own fault, things like that. Get behind, didn't have a chance to study for the exam, only have a day to write a paper, and so on. That the question is, does one cheat or accept the consequences of life, in a sense? That's a very good point, Mike, I think. And to me, it does represent one of the other great lessons we need to learn, is to accept life on its own terms and to accept our own set of limitations. After one is out of the preparatory world that we know as university life, and one lives in another setting, many of the demands put us in a position of having to face that kind of reality. So many times we can't do the best we'd like to do. If I think of my own life and the demands put upon me, there's certain times when I have to give a talk when I just haven't been able to put the kind of time and effort in that I would like to. Not because I wasn't doing anything, but because all the other demands took up my time and energy. And there's only so much of me to go around. And part of what I see in that sort of situation is an attempt to accept the reality. I mean, this is what I've got prepared. This is as good as I can do in this talk, all things considered. And, of course, there's larger judgments about that. I mean, I might have to say, well, I can't take on any more assignments or meet any other responsibilities unless I have the time to prepare better, to stay with that one example. Sometimes you need structural changes in your life. But, however, I'm back to your point, there is a certain fundamental acceptance of reality, which includes accepting our strengths and our virtues and the things we do well as accepting the limitations and our weaknesses and our vices. So that is, I would think students could learn something in that situation by saying the easy way out here would be to cheat. The harder way is to deal with the limitation built into the situation. I find that to be an insightful point about this acceptance side of it. Maybe that is one of the problems with habitual cheating, that one won't accept the limitations of life, which say that we make progress through hard work. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about that I think it is the habitual cheater that, you mask everything over and you don't accept these things, and then you have to wonder, though, what's going to happen when you're out in what is oftentimes called the real world, outside of the university into the workforce or whatever, and you still can't accept that there's certain things which you can't do, or you don't have time for, or you don't have the ability, and you also don't have any real opportunity to mask everything over and make it all seem fine.
Yes, one could more easily get caught in that situation, and if one was not doing the job properly and so on. I think that we're always back to that question that to act dishonorably like that is to hurt ourselves. The cheating does hurt the person that is doing it, because then they don't learn. They don't get the chance to exercise their mind. They don't learn about their own strengths and limitations. They don't learn to take a task and to master it and to have the deeper satisfactions of knowing that I did the best that I could with any given project. So I think when this idea that no one is hurt, again, would be challenged both from the institutional side. The institution is hurt. Academic standards are lowered, and some sort of ideal of truth-seeking is lost. Other people are hurt because of the disgust that's caused in them, or because their grades suffer, or because it upsets them psychically in one way or another. And then I think the person cheating is also hurt. They're hurt because they don't learn to tap their own potential. And it's like, I don't know why I'm flashing this, but I'm thinking of a gentleman who never learned to read throughout school, and he bluffed his way through. He really, as an adult, even in the business world, I happen to know him, and he was fairly successful as a businessman, but he had gotten through school, and he was actually illiterate. He could not read, and I remember being shocked when he told me. It was a very hard admission. I mean, he could hardly get it out, and he says, "You are not going to believe this." but he had to bluff his way, and the pain that he went through from then on was just amazing. I mean, he was always on edge that someone would catch him up, and that he couldn't bluff his way through something. And it was just a horrible life that he led. I got him to somebody who was trained in teaching people to read, and I think that was a great step forward for him. But just the everyday anxiety that I'm going to get caught and someone's going to find out, it would ruin my business and all of that sort of thing. So that's an example in my mind of how a person who cheated through school and didn't learn the requisite skills would end up hurting themselves in the long run. Can you imagine that? I mean, not being able to read, that's an extreme example.
It is, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people, not to that extreme, but do tend to cheat their way through. I've known of people who have made it through high school level, but have never really picked up the skills needed, whether academic or social or all those things. They just kind of fake their way through, and they just have a terrible time dealing. They always feel like they're playing games, and always are on an edge or on a tightrope, trying, I have to keep my balance, because if I don't, people will find out what I've done in the past. And as you get older, like you said, it's very hard to admit that, I never learned to read, or I never really developed in different areas.
Mike, I wonder if this cheating thing is connected with sort of a personal dishonesty, of not dealing with oneself in a straightforward and open way, that there's a way in which there is a deception involved in this. Your claim that some of the habitual cheaters would not feel guilty about it and just see it as a way of life would really be a great personal deception, wouldn't it? I mean, they would be living in a dream world. It would be an extreme case of what we call rationalization. And there again, I see a personal hurt. What we're losing is integrity. Is something that maybe we would value. Somehow when we're talking about that, I'm thinking of Cardinal Newman, who is a great example of someone in the pursuit of truth who wanted to be rigorously honest in all of his argumentations in dealing with people, and went to great lengths to write a large book about defending himself against a charge that he had lied and was involved in deception in his life. I mean, it just hurt him to the center of his being, and aroused in him this tremendous 10-week effort to sort of make an apologia for his whole life, and trying to show how he was not guilty of being a liar. I mean, so he took it as one of his own highest ideals that he would be a man of integrity. And he treasured that, and he treasured his reputation as a man of honesty and so on, to the point that he really felt this great need to defend himself. Well, I mean, I see that as admirable. I think to be respected as a person of integrity is a high ideal in life. There's a sort of deep satisfaction that comes in that. And it relates then to, I guess, what we call this virtue of honesty. Well, the way around this cheating is to cultivate over a period of time a virtue, a second nature, a habitual way of acting that says, no, in any situation I accept the consequences. I don't take the easy way. I try to work my way through it rather than taking this easy path. So the antidote to this cheating in school is a lot of effort to cultivate all the way along the line this virtue of honesty, one that we would prize, I think, highly. When we're talking, Mike, about sort of cultivating this honesty, I suppose that could happen in so many ways of not pretending to yourself that you're better than you are, or not failing to see that you have certain virtues. In other words, it would be dishonest to walk around and say, I'm no good at this. I can't handle that, or God didn't give me brains. It's almost as someone told me recently, to insult God by not using the talents that God has given us. It's to take what the Creator has given us and say, well, I don't think it's worthwhile. It doesn't really matter to me. I just use it in a frivolous fashion. So it is to insult God, as one student was telling me. But I see that this cultivation of the virtue of honesty to be something that we'd have to do almost on a daily basis. It's so easy to get the little exaggeration into conversation, you know, or to make myself more important than I really am, or to stretch the truth in order to impress other people. And if we're going to be honest people, and it seems to me we have to be rigorous with ourselves in trying to deal with reality.
Well, that's probably very true. I mean, you have to make it a habit of being honest, just like the habitual cheater has made it a habit to be dishonest. That's something that it can go either way, and so you're not really concerned with the just individual incidents. It's just that which predominates the life of a given person. If basically you're a good, honest person, or basically a bad, dishonest person, if you want to look at it in those terms,
right,
you have to be pushing and always working towards being the honest person.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right about that. The habits are important. That's the way we can live spontaneously in life, by creating habits that take us in the right direction. So that if you, over a period of time, have been honest with yourself and have tried to do the work in school and accepted your limitations, well then when the episodic cheating is placed in front of you, then you don't have to fall into it. You know, you don't have to just easily succumb to the temptation because you've built up a counter habit. That's the great value of thinking of the moral life in terms of virtues. Great St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century saw the whole moral life in terms of virtues like that. Well, Mike, we've been talking here about the problem of cheating in the university. You've helped me understand this distinction between habitual and episodic cheating, and helped me to get a little feel for the kind of emotional reactions that students have when they're trying to do it right and properly. And part of my response to all that is, well, we must cultivate, all of us, the standard of truth and the personal virtue of truthfulness if we're going to indeed be people of integrity today.